Welcome to the Into Novus Knowledge Agronomy Podcast, your go-to resource for agronomic insights, technology solutions, and ongoing education. At Into, we combine agronomic expertise from soil analysis to best practice application methodologies to provide a holistic view for your yield optimization. Our focus is on practical strategies that improve efficiency and drive better results in the field. Join us for interesting discussions, expert advice, and the latest advancements shaping modern agriculture. Whether you're in the field, on the road, or at your facility, we're here to keep you informed and ahead of the curve. Welcome to the Into podcast. Thanks for listening. Today, joined by my counterpart, Derek Cottrill in Northwest Missouri and Rodney Phelps over in Illinois. How are you guys?
Doing good. Morning, Nick.
Doing great, Nick.
Guys, I thought we'd just start with a little bit of an update from around the geography. I don't know if Derek, if you want to go first, and we'll work to Rodney and back to me.
Sure. Where we're at, as far as corn goes, I guess there's fungicide. Those applications are all basically wrapped up. We do have a decent amount of corn still in R4 to R5 with the earliest stuff. But for the most part, management practices at this point are pretty wrapped up in corn. On the soybean side of things, again, it's variable on stage just because we had such a wide planting window. But the earliest stuff, I'd say the majority is in late R4 to that R5 stage. So we're reaching that point in beans where, they've put on the maximum number of nodes and the amount of flowers are going to. But we're reaching that grain fill period, I guess. We already have in corn, and we're reaching that period with soybeans. But as far as additional management from this point on would be a case-by-case scenario. And for the most part, our applications have wrapped up in both crops type thing.
Awesome. What about you, Rodney?
Yeah, so much like Derek, our fungicide applications on both crops, corn and beans, is pretty well wrapped up. We've had we might have some straggling applications to do. We've just had some rain showers come through and slow that down. For all intents and purposes, fungicides on. Growth stage of our bean crop, we're in that late R5 hitting R6. Beans are extremely healthy, extremely dark green blue color. I can't forecast bean yield worth a damn, but if they yield as good as they look, we should have a good bean crop coming. Corn crop is in that R5 to R5.5 early dent stage, coming on fast due to the heat. Extremely healthy corn crop. We will be variable in areas, though, just determine some nitrogen loss in some areas due to excess water early. And as we are progressing quicker than I like because of the heat that we'll talk about later in our conversation. But overall, a healthy corn crop. Just hopefully we can keep the winds away that we may be experiencing today.
Appreciate that, Rodney. From my standpoint, I'm not going to add a ton that's different, except for the fact that we're way more variable, but we were more variable on planting dates. So our corn crop is anywhere from, that June planted corn is R2 now to all the way to R5.5. And most of that April, May stuff is sitting there in the R5 stage somewhere. And then on the soybeans, the same deal as the corn. We're anywhere from R2 to R6. And it's just a really late planted stuff that's R2. Some really good looking double crop beans at this point in places. But the majority of the beans are sitting there at the R5 stage at some point. So we're a little more variance than you guys, but plowing ahead forward. And then, as Rodney brought up, we can get into that later if we want to, but lots of variability this year and lots of nitrogen loss, which is typical in a really wet year like this, really showing its head here at the end of the season. It seems like we need to start getting that ear on the side of that plant. It starts really sinking away that nitrogen. You can really see those short spots. But anyways, with that said, I think we can roll into a few topics. There's just a potpourri of things, I guess, we thought we'd cover here at the end of the growing season. And I think one of them, Derek, we were talking about earlier, so I might let you handle it. But we talked a little bit about it last time, but probably a good idea to bring it to light, especially with you getting more and more questions up there. But how late is too late to apply a soybean fungicide insecticide application or to make that application? Just some guys waited a little bit until we got that rain, got that rain. Now I'm at R5. Can I still do it? Is the question.
Yeah, and I guess I start whenever I have been getting several of those questions here, given our stages that our soybeans are entering here. And I guess the first thing I'd say is let's make sure we're staging our soybeans properly and then understanding what the soybean plant's doing at that time. Soybeans are one of those to where typically it's not, that it might not be disease driven. We don't have a big outbreak of disease there. And I know we like to be proactive with fungicides, but with soybeans, the later part of that window in that R4 time frame has actually been pretty successful here over the last several years. But like I mentioned earlier in my update, a lot of the beans are hitting that R4 to R5. So R4 is when we got a 3/4 inch pod in the upper four nodes of the plant. And that's a pretty critical stage because that's the point where we stop. After R4, we stop putting on more nodes, and therefore we stop putting on more pods, we stop putting on more flowers, and essentially the soybeans lose their ability to compensate for any sort of stress. And the simple yield equation for beans is seeds per acre times weight per seed, right? And so our seeds per acre part of the equation is essentially set after R4. And so as we go into R5, which R5 is when we got an 1/8 inch long seed inside the pod in the upper four nodes of the plant, is how you know you're in R5. And so what the plant's doing is switching gears to nutrient uptake. And so that would be number one. If I got beans in that R5 stage of should I still apply? Well, think about what stress is going to impact at that point, and essentially what we're going to be impacting at that point is test weight. And so most of the beans that I've seen, I'm not saying we don't have some, maybe pushing R6, which is when we have a seed filling a full pod cavity in the upper four nodes, but most of the beans I've been in over the last couple of days here are still in late R4 to R5. And so in my opinion, we still have an opportunity to protect the plant from stress, because stress is going to have impact on soybeans clear up into R7 type stage. It's just so take that in consideration. Also take into consideration with beans, are they clean, are they weed free? But if you haven't done anything on beans yet and they're in that late R4 to even R5 stage, stress right now will impact test weight at this point. And so keep that in mind. And I guess it's a case by case scenario type deal. But keep the growth and development in mind, and in your head, what is stress right now actually going to impact? And like I said, for the most part, that's going to be test weight in beans right now in my territory, anyways.
Yeah, good points, Derek. I guess I'd also bring up a little bit too. Yeah, you're talking about yield impacting stress, but at R5, that soybean plant can still abort pods. It can still
Yeah.
abort seeds, and so there's a lot of potential yield that can be lost due to stress. And to your point, I mean, we can still pack on seed size, and seed size can drive a lot, not only in corn yields, but also in soybean yields. So, to what you're saying is, I guess the point I always come back to is we can still impact a lot at R5. There's still a lot of potential yield to protect. So, sometimes I wonder if a lot of us just give up on soybeans too early, and management later would actually be really, really beneficial. So,
Well,
some really,
you bring up a good point, Nick, is because I mentioned that seed number, pod number's been set, right? Well, I guess maximum pod number and seed number has been set. Because I think you bring up a good point there is we can still blow off pods, and we can still arrest pods and impact development. Because I've been getting plenty of questions too, because we do have, with our moisture and everything like that, we do have some bean fields that still got weeds and things like that. And essentially there's nothing labeled at this point. If you still got weeds there. Plus on top of that, you do have a potential to still lose pods. And so while I say pod number and seed number set, well, maximum pod and seed number set, we can definitely still reduce that number. But again, it's not going to compensate and put on more flowers at this point.
yeah, yeah, perfect points. Um, Rodney, anything you want to add on that topic?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, in my geography, the beans look so healthy. We kind of, I don't want to say forget them, but say, boy, those beans are they're okay. But you guys bring up valid points. Is we want to put as much weight in that seed now that we can, and it doesn't take much to make a bean bigger and heavier to add to yield. So, just because they're looking really, really good and oh, should I track them down or whatever, you guys bring up valid points. We can still clear up to almost R7. I've seen some good response out of fungicide with insecticide. For some reason, there's a synergistic effect with that combination, and still see positive results.
Yeah, good point. I think I brought up last time, but been playing around with some late insecticide applications the past few years on soybeans, and man, there's a lot to be gained in Missouri, anyways, for blowing stink bugs back one last time. Probably more than people think. With that said, good points, guys, on soybeans. Maybe transitioning over into corn, and you guys can jump in, add in wherever you want to. I'll just say, at least in my geography, most of the corn we're sitting at R5, and some of the earliest R5.5. But just thinking about Derek's question on soybeans, what does stress impact? So, stress at R5 on corn is going to impact kernel weight, or basically kernel size, and so you think about R5, at the start of R5, only about half of that kernel weight is determined. So there's still a lot of kernel weight that you can impact, stress can impact, I guess I should say, and you can try to protect. If you just run those numbers, I mean, to give you an example, if you have an ear that's 16 around and 36 long and you have 32,000 of them, if you divided that number by 80,000, which has kind of become more of the average kernel size, in a stressful year, we can get up to 90,000, but 80 is more of the average. That would make that corn 230 bushel. If you were able to pack on 70,000 kernels, you made a bigger kernel size, 70,000 kernels per bushel. That corn goes from 230 to 260. So it's just, I'm just making the point that in that math of kernel size, there's a lot of potential yield that can be added or taken away. Speaking of how the stress impacts it, so just something to be mindful of. Um, I'll also say on that stress piece of it, I don't know about you guys, but a fair amount of tip back that we're seeing in places this year, and it varies quite a bit by planting date, by geography, by hybrid, by management, etc. But I just, a lot of people asking why. You just got to keep in mind that corn's more sensitive to kernel abortion in that R2 to R3 stage. That's when a lot of it's going to happen. So, depending on the planting date or the hybrid, if it's sitting there in that sensitive stage when the stress hits, i.e., for us, was some hot and dry temperatures there a couple weeks back, some planting dates, some hybrids are going to take it more on the chin. So, you just have to keep that in mind and understand that yeah, stress is going to impact corn differently depending on the stage that it's in. So while I mean, and some of that stuff that's got some tip back, it can make up for it in kernel size if we get some ideal conditions down the stretch. But yeah, it's limited by that, by the point that it was at when the stress hit. And so some of those stages R2, R3, pretty sensitive to kernel abortion. And now we get out to R5, and obviously we're more sensitive to kernel size. The kernels are kind of set, and it's pretty rare that we're going to abort anything this late, but we are going to pull back on kernel size. So I don't know if you
Um,
guys want to add anything to that.
Yeah, Nick, if you brought up the tip back, and there's several different reasons why we can have tip back. Now, one of the most common ones is, nitrogen or nutrient type deficiency. And I guess what I've been reminding guys, especially those, if you hadn't done any sort of application right now, I mean, I do believe most of the fungicide and things like that should have already taken place with the majority of our corn. That response to fungicide, that bell curve, if you would, typically peaks in that VT to R1 type time frame and falls off after that in terms of just a straight yield response. But what you could still potentially get later on at this point is some stock strength and then things like that. And so remember that I know we haven't seen a ton of disease yet. We've been so hot. While we've had the moisture, we've been so incredibly hot here over last week that we're not seeing a lot of our key diseases ramp up. But remember, a lot of our diseases are opportunistic type pathogens. And so if you have a situation like you're describing where you got tipped back potentially from a nutrient deficiency, that crop essentially is most likely going to be more susceptible from an opportunistic type stock rot pathogen that could move in. And so I guess from this point on, if you haven't done anything yet, you might not get that yield response, but you might get that stock strength, which leads into harvestability. And so keep that in mind. If my crop is stressed and has tip back because of nutrient deficiency, it may or may not be, depending on the hybrid, be more susceptible to some of the stock rots that move in. I know last year, stock rots and corn laying over at harvest, I was getting a lot of calls on that. And again, that leads not only the yield might be there because a lot of yield's being set already, but what's harvestability worth to you type deal. And so keep that in mind. We've missed our window, I guess, in terms of our best response to fungicide in terms of just yield, but we could still impact harvestability with some late management in certain scenarios. And I think you said it too, it's going to be a case by case, field by field scenario type deal.
So speaking of R5, I've had some experience with applying a late fungicide at that timing, and we're more after the stalk health, plant health for harvestability, especially if you're looking at staring at some acres ahead of you. You want to get it early R5. You start getting out into more of the later dent stage, you're not going to see the economic return, but you are going to get some plant strength and plant health. And so if you're inclined to do a late application and you're thinking you need some plant health, get it on here in this early R5. You'll be happy you did.
Good points, guys, on disease. I guess for me, just back to the stress piece of it, I guess that's where I wanted to go. Just keep in mind, I mentioned the tip back. I guess I didn't feel like I spelled this out well enough. I just kept saying heat, and that's generally what we say an overarching term. But keep in mind, these nights where we're 76 degrees or 77 degrees at night, and that's all the more we cool down. That's harder on the corn than it is being 95 during the day. It cannot cool down at night. It's burning energy to respire that should be going into that ear, and that's where a lot of the stress from the heat comes from, is just those hot temperatures at night. And obviously dry weather, which luckily got this rain late last week, but dry weather obviously has an impact too. But just keep that in mind. I just want to spell that out a little bit better. And then the nitrogen loss thing, Rodney mentioned it at the beginning, seeing some fields where you see some in loss on the edges, et cetera. If you get up from the air now, whether it was a drone or in a plane, et cetera, like you can see portions of a lot of fields where there's some yellow spots. And we had a fair amount of nitrogen loss this year. And obviously, some soil types are going to show more in loss than others. But this is a year where guys were rewarded for in season nitrogen, especially some pretty aggressive plans. Those that tend to just put on a pre-plan and walk away, it wasn't the year for that. We're going to have some really good yields in places in the field. I think the yield monitor is going to bounce all over. I think we're going to have some really high highs, but I think we'll also see some lower lows than maybe what we have the last couple of years, based on stand. Some stands weren't the greatest, based on nitrogen loss and other things. But yeah, there's a fair amount of yellow corn. I guess the point I'm making, when you get up from the air, and it seems like you see that early on, then the corn goes through this tasseling stage. Everything kind of looks green and covers up, and you think everything's all right. And then when that corn starts filling that ear, you see those yellow spots show back up. It's running short in those places. Um, with that said, I guess the other point I wanted to get to, guys, here at the very end is just, Rodney, you brought it up yesterday, but how far away is harvest? How far are we from harvest?
Yeah, when you look at how long grain fill is, normally it's 58 days from, once we dent to black layer, start denting in black layer. And we've had, up here anyway, my geography, hot temps hot nights. We're racing to black layer, which I do not like. And if you think about we cut, let's say 10% off of those days, that's almost 6 days sooner to black layer. That does not allow a lot of starch, a lot of weight to go in those kernels and kernel depth. So, and at the same time, we're racing to maturity. And so, I told you I've had some 105-day corn planted May 8th that's already denting. And so when I think of that, harvest is right around the corner. And what is really deceiving is we've still got some really green plants and we've got, some healthy crop corn. And so everybody is lulled into, we're not, if you don't get out and look at things, oh, harvest is a ways off. But when you get in the field and you look at the ear and you're breaking the ear open and you look at the milk line and you look, we're a lot closer to harvest. If the weather stays the way it is now, we're a lot closer to harvest than we have been in other years. So diligence and getting out and seeing what is going on in the crop. Also, I saw some early group 2 beans starting to senesce yesterday. So the the temperatures are great, but it's also forcing this crop to mature at a not as a natural stage. I would say we're racing to harvest, and I don't like that.
Yeah, good points, Rodney. I'll just say, yeah, typically the start of black layer, it's 400 GDUs to maturity, and if you're half milk line, it's 200 GDUs to maturity. So to Rodney's point, normally this time of year that's going to take a little while, but at the current temperatures we're at, I was running the numbers last night. I mean, you're like maybe 16 days, maybe just 2 weeks at the current heat that we have, especially the heat at night. 2 weeks away from accumulating 400 GDUs in like 16 days. Like, that's fast. That's really fast. And so if you add some, you just figure a point a day and you add some time to that, like, some of this corn that's black layer now, if the temps stay where they're at, it could be, you could have dry corn in a month from now. Um, and so if you're taking it out in the 20s, I mean, you're not even talking that long to your point, like maybe 3 weeks. It's like you said, it's almost scary how quick it's racing and it's pushing it through the grain fill stages. And typically for yield and kernel weight, that's not what we want. We want a slow grain fill, and we're not getting it right now. Derek, anything you want to add on that?
I think you guys hit it spot on. We're kind of in the same situation. We'll have some of the earliest planted stuff. It'll be mid-September before a lot of that's ready. But we are accumulating GDUs, like you said, Nick, pretty fast right now. It might cool off next week, but yeah, it's coming up pretty quick for sure. And the earliest of stuff will be ready here in, like you said, 2 to 3 weeks probably.
With that said, guys, you got any last fleeting thoughts that you want to share with the group?
I guess my thing would be, again, I know we're still focused on this crop, and we just got done talking about when harvest will be of this crop, but we are reaching that period where, you know, 2027 crop starts this fall. And so whether it be anhydrous, fall fertilizer, residue management, things like that, I just encourage guys to start thinking about some of your fall programs and things that are going to take place after harvest. Again, I know we're reaching that point where we've put a lot into this crop and we're still focused on it. And so, and I agree that we need to focus on the crop we have out there now, but it's certainly not too early to start thinking about some of your management decisions you might do this fall. And I think the best way to do that is either work with your agronomist or your retail partner and just start asking some questions on some stuff you're going to be doing this fall. Just don't forget about that and start planning early. Typically, just like with everything with farming, if we can be proactive with our planning and management, it usually works out better that way.
And I guess I would say, we talked about racing to harvest. I would get out in your crop, especially the corn crop, put your eyes on it, see what you've got going on, and then get a plan. And to Derek's point, 27 starts now too. And so if if harvest is coming that fast, then that means your 27 plans are coming fast. So I don't want anybody to think we're sounding the alarm bell, but we're being realistic, and we want to make sure everybody knows what's coming at them.
Yeah, those are good points, guys. I guess, Rodney, to tag on what you're saying, the realization I'm coming to myself is, yeah, take some time. If you did some different management stuff or you ran some of your own tests, et cetera, this year, now would be a good time to go look at them. And I'm realizing that time is fleeting away for me to get everywhere that I want to get to. So just be sure to take a glance at them here before we finish up the season. Well, guys, I appreciate it. Really good points. Good discussion. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you for joining us. This podcast is brought to you by Into Novus Knowledge. Please reach out to your Into agronomist if we can help in any way. Join us next time for more in-depth agronomic advice.